For years, Europeans have been told that America's obsession with convenience comes at a price, that bigger stores, longer hours, drive-throughs, and services built around cars are excessive rather than advanced. And at first, many European visitors believed exactly that. But something strange began happening after they actually spent time in the United States. It wasn't the skyscrapers or the technology that stayed with them. It was how effortlessly ordinary life seemed to move. A late-night grocery run, picking up medicine without wasting half the day, finding what you need in one place instead of making 3 separate stops. These things sound almost too small to matter until you get used to them. Then suddenly, every unnecessary wait, every closed door, and every extra trip becomes impossible to ignore. And for some European fans, that realization raised an uncomfortable question. What if the America they once called excessive had simply figured out something Europe was too proud to admit? Because in this video, we're looking at 5 everyday conveniences European fans say made parts of Europe feel surprisingly outdated after experiencing America. And the deeper we go, the less this becomes a story about drive-thrus or giant stores. It becomes a story about something far more valuable, especially as we get older: time, comfort, and the freedom to make everyday life just a little easier. And the final reason may explain why some conveniences are almost invisible to Americans, until they leave them behind. For many European fans, one of the first surprises in America doesn't happen inside a stadium or beneath a famous skyline. It happens much later, when the day should supposedly be over. You realize you forgot something for breakfast. You need medicine. You want to pick up groceries after a long evening out. And instead of checking the clock and wondering whether you've already missed your chance, you simply go. That sounds ordinary to most Americans. But to visitors accustomed to earlier closing hours, limited Sunday trading, or businesses that operate on narrower schedules in parts of Europe, it can feel like discovering an entirely different philosophy of daily life. Across much of America, supermarkets, restaurants, pharmacies, and convenience stores often stay open well into the evening, while some locations operate around the clock. The important difference isn't simply that Americans can shop later, it's that the system is often designed around the assumption that your life does not always fit neatly between 9 and 5. And this is where the contrast becomes difficult to ignore. In many European communities, shorter business hours are tied to real advantages: stronger boundaries around work, quieter Sundays, and a different balance between commerce and personal life. But there is another side to that bargain. If you work late, care for children, travel at unusual hours, or simply discover at 9 p.m. that something important is missing, your options can shrink very quickly. In America, the expectation is often reversed. The business adjusts to the customer's schedule rather than expecting the customer to organize an entire day around the business. For older visitors, this convenience can mean even more. At 25, making an extra trip tomorrow may feel like nothing. At 65, when every unnecessary drive, long wait, or repeated journey takes a little more energy, having more options can become a genuine form of comfort. Convenience stops looking like laziness. It starts looking like control over your own time. And perhaps that is what surprised some European fans most. America's advantage was not that everything was always open, because it isn't. Nor is every European country the same. The revelation was something subtler. In America, availability itself has become part of the service. The question is often not, can we serve you during our schedule? But rather, how can we be available when you need us? Once you become accustomed to that feeling, going back can be strangely frustrating. Because the first time you stand outside a closed store thinking, in America, I could have taken care of this right now, the convenience you barely notice suddenly becomes the thing you miss most. And yet, being able to shop late is only the beginning. Because America took this obsession with saving time one step further by building an entire world where, sometimes, you don't even have to leave your car. Then comes a moment that feels almost ridiculous to some European visitors at first. You are hungry, so you stay in your car. You need to pick up a prescription, and in some places you can stay in your car. You need to handle a simple banking transaction, grab a coffee, collect an order, or pick up groceries you already bought online, and once again, you may barely need to step outside. To many Europeans, the drive-thru has long been seen as a symbol of everything excessive about America. Too many cars, too much consumption, too little walking. And that criticism is not entirely without reason. America's car dependence creates real problems, and European cities often offer something many Americans wish they had more of: compact neighborhoods where daily life can happen on foot. But when European fans actually experience the American system for themselves, another side of the story becomes harder to dismiss. The car is not treated merely as transportation. It has been integrated into the entire machinery of convenience. Think about what that means on an ordinary day. A parent with sleeping children in the back seat doesn't necessarily have to unload everyone just to collect dinner. Someone driving home after a long day can pick up an order that is already waiting. An older customer with limited mobility may avoid walking across a huge parking lot. When the weather is brutally hot, freezing cold, or pouring rain, a task that could become exhausting can sometimes be completed in minutes. And this is where something many Europeans once laughed at begins to make uncomfortable sense. The drive-thru was never really the point. The deeper idea was this: why should the customer do more work than necessary? That question seems to appear everywhere in American consumer culture. If people are already driving, businesses find ways to meet them where they are. If getting out of the car adds another 10 minutes, someone eventually asks whether those 10 minutes can be eliminated. If customers are tired of waiting inside, someone creates curbside pickup. The result is a system constantly trying to remove one more step between wanting something and getting it. For viewers who remember a time when almost every simple errand required standing in line, carrying cash, filling out paperwork, and waiting patiently because there was simply no alternative, this transformation is especially striking. Convenience is easy to dismiss when you are young and have endless energy, but as life becomes busier and mobility becomes more valuable, saving a few steps here and 20 minutes there begins to feel less like indulgence and more like intelligent design. Of course, Europe made a different trade-off. Many European cities were built long before the automobile and remain far more walkable than much of suburban America. In the right European neighborhood, you may not need a car at all, but that is precisely what makes the American approach so fascinating. Europe often tries to make life convenient without the car. America became extraordinarily good at making life convenient once you are inside one. And after experiencing both systems, some visitors discover that the question is no longer which one is simply better. The more unsettling realization is that something they once dismissed as ridiculous can become incredibly difficult to give up. But the biggest conveniences in America are not always the ones with giant signs or drive-through lanes. Sometimes they are the tiny things waiting quietly in the background until the moment you suddenly need them. But perhaps the most powerful conveniences in America are the ones Americans barely notice anymore. A restroom when you need one, a large parking lot when your legs are tired, cold water and ice on a brutally hot afternoon, a shopping cart waiting near the entrance, a place to sit down, recharge, refill, or simply take a moment before continuing your day. None of these things sound revolutionary. In fact, taken individually, they seem almost too ordinary to mention. And that is precisely the point. For some European visitors, the surprise is not that these conveniences exist only in America. They certainly do not. Europe has excellent public spaces, services, and infrastructure of its own, often superior in ways Americans openly envy. The difference they begin to notice is how frequently American businesses seem to anticipate the small inconveniences that might interrupt a customer's day. Before you realize you need something, someone has often already thought about where to put it. Consider something as simple as parking. In many older European cities, finding a convenient parking space can become an event in itself. You circle narrow streets, search for a spot, walk several blocks, and then remember that whatever you buy still has to make the journey back with you. In suburban America, the experience can be completely different. You pull in, park near your destination, load everything into the trunk, and leave. To a younger traveler, that enormous parking lot might look ugly, wasteful, even absurd. But ask someone carrying heavy groceries. Ask a grandparent traveling with family. Ask someone whose knees no longer enjoy a 20-minute walk carrying bags. Suddenly, what looked like wasted space begins to look like something else entirely. A system designed to remove effort from an ordinary task. Then, there are the even smaller details. The expectation of ice in your drink. Free water in many restaurants. Restrooms available to customers in countless businesses. Wide aisles, elevators, escalators, seating areas, shopping carts large enough for a serious grocery run. Americans rarely return home talking excitedly about these things because, for them, many have simply become part of the background. But convenience is almost always invisible when it works. You notice the elevator when there isn't one. You appreciate the restroom when you cannot find one. You understand the value of easy parking only after spending 30 minutes searching for a space. And you realize how much you depend on small comforts only when suddenly, unexpectedly, they disappear. For viewers who have lived long enough to remember when everyday life demanded more physical effort, there is something familiar about this transformation. Progress is not always a dramatic invention that changes the world overnight. Sometimes progress is simply removing one unnecessary difficulty at a time, until an exhausting day becomes an ordinary one. And perhaps that is where America's obsession with convenience becomes most persuasive. It does not always announce itself. It simply waits quietly in the background, saving you 5 minutes here, a long walk there, one unnecessary frustration after another. But if these small conveniences save effort, the next American idea attacks something even more valuable: the time lost running from one place to another just to finish a simple shopping list. Then European visitors walk into an American store and encounter something that, at first, can feel completely unnecessary. The building is enormous. The shopping carts are enormous. The parking lot seems to stretch forever. Inside, you can buy groceries, clothes, electronics, medicine, household supplies, garden equipment, and enough food to prepare for what looks like a minor apocalypse, all without moving your car once. To many Europeans, this is another example of America being America. Bigger than necessary, excessive by design, and completely unapologetic about it. And compared with the small neighborhood shops, bakeries, markets, and walkable shopping streets found across Europe, the American model can certainly feel less personal, but then something happens. You arrive with a list of 15 completely unrelated things, and 45 minutes later, you are finished. No second store, no third stop, no driving across town because one shop doesn't carry what you need. No reorganizing tomorrow's schedule because you forgot one item today. You park once, walk through one set of doors, and potentially solve an entire week's worth of household needs in a single trip. And suddenly, that enormous building begins to make sense. The real American innovation was never simply putting more products on shelves. It was turning time itself into something businesses compete to save. That philosophy is visible throughout American retail. The supermarket becomes a pharmacy. The big box store becomes a grocery store. Online orders are waiting at the curb. Products can be bought in quantities large enough to reduce the number of future shopping trips. The entire experience seems built around one question: how many separate errands can we eliminate from your day? For someone in their 20s, spending Saturday afternoon visiting several different stores might not feel particularly difficult. But life changes. You start working longer hours. You raise children. You care for aging parents. Eventually, you become the older parent yourself. And somewhere along that journey, an afternoon spent completing errands stops feeling like an adventure. It starts feeling like time you would rather have back. That is why the American one-stop shopping model can become surprisingly persuasive, especially to visitors who initially dismiss it. A giant store may not have the charm of a neighborhood market. Nobody is pretending otherwise. But convenience and charm are answering two completely different questions. One asks, where would I enjoy spending my afternoon? The other asks, how can I avoid spending my entire afternoon shopping in the first place? And America became remarkably good at answering the second. Perhaps that is why some European visitors find themselves experiencing a strange reversal. At first, the size feels overwhelming. Then they learn where everything is. They discover they can complete 5 errands in one trip. And eventually, the very thing they once criticized as excessive becomes the thing they quietly wish they had when they return home. Because as you get older, you begin to understand something younger people rarely think about. Money can sometimes be earned again. Time cannot, and that leads to the final reason. Because America didn't stop at making shopping easier once you reach the store. It began asking an even more radical question. What if you didn't have to go to the store at all? And then comes the final stage of American convenience, where the entire philosophy seems to reach its logical conclusion. After making stores easier to access, errands faster to complete, and services available for longer hours, American businesses began asking an even more ambitious question. What if the customer did not have to make the trip at all? For many European visitors, this is where convenience in America begins to feel less like a collection of individual services and more like an entire system built around protecting one increasingly valuable resource: time. Groceries can be ordered from the kitchen and delivered to the front door. Dinner can be purchased before leaving work and collected on the way home. An entire shopping list can be prepared by someone else, placed directly into the trunk through curbside pickup, and completed without spending an hour walking through a store. None of these services is uniquely American, and many are now common across Europe as well. But what stands out in the United States is how aggressively businesses compete to remove one more inconvenience from the customer's day. If one company can deliver tomorrow, another looks for a way to deliver today. If customers dislike waiting in line, mobile ordering appears. If walking through a giant store takes too much time, curbside pickup becomes an alternative. The pattern repeats so consistently that it reveals something deeper about American consumer culture. Convenience itself has become a product, and businesses understand that saving someone 20 minutes can sometimes be just as valuable as saving them $20. That idea becomes increasingly powerful with age because our relationship with time changes whether we notice it happening or not. When you are 25, an extra trip across town may be little more than an inconvenience, and spending an afternoon completing errands may simply feel like part of life. Decades later, however, time begins to carry a different weight. An hour saved from shopping can become an hour spent with family. An unnecessary journey avoided can mean an evening at home. And having heavy groceries brought to the door can turn an exhausting task into something almost effortless. This is why dismissing convenience as laziness misses the larger point. The best convenience does not simply encourage people to do less. It gives them more control over what deserves their effort. When technology and services remove repetitive tasks that nobody particularly enjoys, people can redirect that time toward family, friends, hobbies, rest, or simply an afternoon that would otherwise have disappeared into a collection of errands. And perhaps this is where the 5 reasons European fans notice about America finally connect. The stores that remain open when ordinary life refuses to follow a perfect schedule. The services designed around the automobile, the small comforts waiting exactly when they are needed, the ability to complete several errands under one roof. And finally, the growing number of services willing to come directly to the customer all point toward the same underlying philosophy. Everyday life should require no more effort than necessary. That does not mean America has discovered the perfect way to live, nor does it mean Europe is universally outdated. In many European cities, convenience takes an entirely different and sometimes more elegant form. People can walk to a bakery, take public transportation, visit neighborhood shops, and live in communities where daily necessities are already close enough that a giant parking lot or a drive-thru would solve a problem that barely exists. America and Europe began with different environments, different histories, and different priorities. So naturally, they arrived at different definitions of what an easier life should look like. Yet, there is something about the American version that can become remarkably difficult to forget once you have lived with it. A store closing earlier than expected suddenly feels more frustrating. A simple errand requiring 3 separate stops begins to feel unnecessarily complicated. And 30 minutes spent waiting becomes 30 minutes, you start wondering whether you really needed to lose. None of these inconveniences is dramatic enough to ruin a day, but together, they can quietly change the way you think about how much friction we accept simply because we have grown accustomed to it. Perhaps that is the real reason some European visitors say America's convenience can make parts of Europe feel outdated. It is not because every American system is newer, smarter, or better, but because America has spent decades turning convenience into an expectation rather than an occasional luxury. Once people experience a world where businesses constantly compete to save them another trip, another line, or another hour, they begin asking a question they may never have considered before. How many small inconveniences in our daily lives are truly unavoidable, and how many are still there simply because nobody has bothered to remove them? In the end, America's greatest convenience may not be the drive-thru, the enormous store, the late opening hours, or the package waiting outside your door. It may simply be the expectation that ordinary life can always be made a little easier, because 5 minutes saved here, 20 minutes saved there, and one unnecessary journey avoided may seem insignificant on their own, but over the course of a lifetime, they become something far more valuable than convenience itself. They become time you get to keep.